It is the February meeting of the Stage Hypnotist Mastermind. It's good to have you here. Our guest this month is a regular meeting attendee. I'm joined by Jim Kellner, who's going to talk with us about comedy. Jim, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you, Paul?
I'm outstanding, and I'm grateful for you being willing to talk about your previous experiences here. Let's get right into it. So before you were a stage hypnotist, you worked
Yeah.
for years as a stand-up. How many years would you say you did that?
Well, it was off and on for about 10. I did it for a couple of years, and I took a big break because I couldn't make any money. And then I came back to it, still couldn't make any money. And so I kept doing that. So it was over about a 10-year period. Total time in probably about 6 years.
Yeah. I mean, we all get so used to seeing plenty of stand-up on like YouTube or Netflix specials or Comedy Central stuff, but isn't that really sort of how that industry works? Like, isn't that almost like, like books, like the average book makes like $100 in sales if you take all the books that have ever been published. Isn't
Right.
stand-up kind of like that too? You got a lot of
Oh,
people
yeah.
out there working for next to no money.
Dude, that's a really bad thing about stand-up, because even back when I was doing I mean, it's just crazy because comics, like most entertainers, will work for free happily just so they can get stage time. But it's, even when I actually had some road gigs, which were like, ooh, that was the dream job. Then you get to go on the road and you play these small little towns all over the place. I was getting $100 a show as a feature, and that was only about 12 years ago. And apparently that had been that way since the 90s. So, I'm out there with headliners that are making $200 or $300, and they're talking about, I used to make this much in the 80s. I even went out with guys in the 80s. Of course, a lot of their jokes were from the 80s. So you go, well, guys, maybe you need to write something new. Maybe make a little more money.
Well, and your timing was kind of unfortunate too, right? Because you really got
Oh, yeah.
into comedy as literally comedy clubs were shuttering left and right. I mean, that's just a
Yeah.
whole landscape change. I remember, I grew up in New Hampshire, and I went to university in New Hampshire, and that was 92 to 96. And even way back then, like, there was a comedy club in the next town over that we would go to, and probably either like right around the time I graduated in 96 or right after that, it closed. And like, there weren't a million of them, but they just kept
Yeah.
closing and closing and closing. And so that's a tough market to get into, especially when there's probably a lot more comedians out there trying to get work than there are hypnotists. So
Yeah. Definitely more. Definitely more. Yeah.
what do you feel like, what did you learn doing stand up that really obviously and directly transferred to how you work as a stage hypnotist?
Well, one of the great things is and this is the unfortunate thing about being a stage hypnotist. We don't get to see each other work very much. Um, and when you're a comic, you get to see each other work all the time. So you're always seeing people that are not very good. You go, oh, I don't want to do that. But you're also seeing people that are really, really good. And so, like, you go out on the road, and so, like, I mean, a lot of these guys were, I mean, they'd gotten their start like in the 80s and 90s, and their jokes were old and stuff, but they were still really funny. So, and they would help me write jokes. I think that the thing that I learned was like just the trying to get to a story quickly, and then being able to do things like you can, even if you can get this pattern going. And I would see this sometimes, this pattern going where you don't even, it's like, even if the joke isn't funny, the audience will laugh. It's like it's fact, they're kind of hypnotizing them. They're using some NLP. A lot of times I think they don't even know they're using it. But they will, it's like you get this pattern going, and like the joke may not even be that funny, but they get a huge laugh just because it's kind of a rolling thing. The other thing I learned was, I was told years ago by a comedian that surely had no knowledge about NLP, about anchoring, and so she would say, when you do a funny joke, she goes, do something, either like tap your foot or tap the microphone or make a gesture or something. And then every time you tell a joke, when you get to the punchline, you do that same thing and people will laugh anyway because you've anchored it to them. And so, and then the other thing I learned too was watching actually Gabe Rutledge, who was phenomenal. I learned how to just make facial expressions. Like facial expressions will just drive a joke home. I mean, if you're getting some laughs and you can, especially when you're reacting to what the audience, what the subjects are doing. Oh man, it's like you're having fun with the group, even if you've seen that same routine 1,000 times.
Yeah, I get it. Like it's sort of like an acknowledgement. We're both in this funny moment together.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. I think and I'll say the other thing too. The other thing that I think I learned was just to be, I don't want to say fearless because I'm rarely fearless, but able to overcome the fear. Because we would go out, like we would go, and because there wasn't that many comedy clubs, there weren't open mics all over the place. We'd go to we'd drive across town, do 3 or 4 in a night, but it would be like go to a poetry open night, a music open night, open mic, and we just do jokes at those. And most of the time we just got slaughtered. But it didn't matter. We're just working our jokes.
How much time do you spend writing versus just like thinking?
These days, I'll be honest, and now you say it, I'm like, well, not nearly enough. I don't really spend. Before I do a show, I want to spend. I typically want to spend. I spend about an hour kind of looking over everything and see if there's anything I can make special about this one. But I don't sit down and write jokes like I used to. I don't.
That didn't transfer for you. You don't sit down and actually try to like build a skit like you used to build a joke, kind of.
I did it first.
Yeah.
And one of the problems I ran into in the beginning was I spent too much time telling jokes in the beginning. So I would do 20 minutes of jokes and then start the induction. And my induction was like 15 minutes back then too. So by the time I do any skits, it's like, 15 minutes of skits.
Yeah.
I got lazy because, you can depend on the audience, on the subjects to be funny. So I'm like, I guess I don't need to be funny. But then you run into those situations where you're going, man, I sure wish I had 20 minutes of material to use right now.
Do you actively bill yourself and promote yourself as a comedy hypnotist?
Yeah, I do.
So here's the other thing I always kind of thought was weird to me was I was like, what other kind of hypnotist is there if you're on stage? Like are there like really serious dramatic hypnotists running around? like I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, have you ever seen like, I just don't get that. I'm like, I mean, it's like, I'm fine with you doing it, but I'm like, I'm kind of like, well, how else would you be? Like, we're all comedy hypnotists, aren't we? Is that just a marketing thing? Or
I think theoretically we are. I don't know that we all are. I've had, no, really. Well, actually the reason that I started doing stage hypnosis was I saw a show and the guy was not funny at all. And I was like, good Lord, I can surely do this. And it was one of those situations where I think the guy was kind of handicapped by his personality. And I don't mean that in a bad, like, it was just, I don't think he had the personality he would have had to work really hard to get past that. But I've had club owners and people at shows come up to me afterwards and go, I didn't know hypnosis shows were supposed to be funny.
Really?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I had a booker down in Tucson tell me that he's had 3 hypnotists there. 3 were good hypnotists and only 2 were funny. And the 2 that were funny were me and Michael DeShalit.
Michael DeShalit is funny. So at least
he didn't tell me who the third one was.
That makes sense.
I think it was Howie. He said.
Howie. Hey, all right. So I'm already out of my time. So let me open it up to everybody else who has questions for Jim. Follow-ups on what we've talked about or taking things in another direction. Either one is fine. Questions for Jim.
Hi,
Terry.
Jim. Do you ever look at doing some improv? I've been working with some improv groups in town and just trying to help me. My mind works pretty weird anyway, but just try to weird it out some more to so when they do something funny, you're right there with the line or whatever. You ever do any work with improvs?
I'll tell you, of all the performing I've done, I would say that singing and improv scare me the most. But yes, I have done improv. Well, the thing I hate about improv is they say there's no rules, but there kind of are rules, and it's kind of irritating. But I think, and this is the thing too, like when people ask me, like, how do I get started as a stage hypnotist? I always say, go do some stand-up open mics and go do improv. I actually think improv is if you have no experience with it, it can help you so much because being able to respond to what's happening is vital. It's just so important to be able to make funny in any kind of a situation.
Yeah.
I would and
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, and in a lot of what this group I work, there are different exercises that you do to get your brain to work outside of the normal way that you would think, and so I don't know. I find it enjoying to, I don't know. I think it's kind of cool, and I think it's helped me some. So, and the one time you were talking about the hypnotist that really sucked that you watch. I'm sorry I didn't take the time to say hi when you were there. I didn't know you at the time.
I know. Well, exactly. Yeah. You've gotten better since then.
Yeah.
You've gotten better since. Jeffrey has a question.
Just jump in on that one real quick.
Yeah, I'm still sitting here in the dark. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Oh, that's okay. We can hear you though, Jeffrey. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I'd like to hear everybody talk a little bit about what we're doing in the face of political correctness and hypnotic comedy. There's a whole bunch of sexual stuff one cannot do anymore. How has it colored what you do in your acts?
Jim, you're our guest. Why don't you start us off with that?
I'll say for me, and this is probably going to be a little bit controversial to some of you, I know, but I feel like if somebody's paying me, I want to make them happy. And so one of the things we used to have trouble with comedians, a lot of times is, they want to express their artistic freedom. And I mean, if you want to open up your own club and do that, that's fine. But I mean, I think if you want to work, you do what the client asks you to do. And then at some point you become like Dave Chappelle and you do whatever the fuck you want and people will pay to see you. But until you get to Dave Chappelle level, he can take a lot of hate, right? And still make a living and have a lot of people on his side. So yeah, I will do whatever they say. I think sometimes it's weird. I think it's annoying. I had to sign a contract with saying that I wouldn't use any offensive language on a college show. And I just want to ask him, well, what words are offensive? Could you list those for me? I want to make sure I don't miss any of them.
That list does exist.
Yeah, they do. But you know what? I think, Jim, overall, that's a great answer. Like that's a great answer, right? There's a service aspect to it and a creative aspect to it. And I think you framed it really nicely. Like, it makes me think back to Salish, when we talked with Salish before. He had alluded to, he had that one time that he got hired by a college. And, for those of you who don't know Salish, like, he can work clean if you ask him to, but most of the time he's out there billing himself as an R-rated hypnotist, right? So he's at the conferences, the NACA conferences and the APCA conferences. That's the smaller, they're like NACA, but he's promoting that way. So the school hired him, and then he got there and he did his show, and then he got this like scathing review in the student newspaper, and it caused a lot of bad press for him. It didn't really go viral, but it got picked up, and it was just a student newspaper. And it was like, I just remember being so angry on his behalf, kind of. I was like, you knew it wasn't like it was a surprise. Like, you hired him and now you're just letting someone make it sound like he's this awful person. It felt really, really unfair to me. But again, that's like the flip side, right? Where you're like, but if they hire you and they do say, this is what we need, right? If you don't want to take the gig, you don't got to take the gig. Colin loves to make people angry. So Colin probably has a different perspective on this.
He's Colin. Who I was thinking of when I said there's probably some disagreement in here.
Actually, no. Jim, you hire me to do a show for you. I will not get up there and do 60 minutes of material on the joys of pineapple pizza. Okay. No, seriously. If you hire
Good
me,
man.
if you hire me, I'm going to interrogate you like I have you in Guantanamo fucking Bay to understand exactly what the level of content is that you want. Now, my spirit animal, 2 words we're not supposed to say, but fuck them.
That's cultural appropriation, right? Is that what that is? I don't.
They're comedy clubs. Why?
Yeah.
I can go in there, and that is my church, and I can preach it, and I don't have to hold back. I'm not somebody who has hatred for anyone, and so I'm not going to express that. I have never, because I still fear my dad, dropped an N-bomb ever. Okay, it's like that's not going to happen. The C-bomb isn't really funny to me. Okay, and so, and I go by the Lisa Lampanelli rule, the queen of me. The only rule is be funny. That's it. And but it's like, but that's why I generally I don't bid on college shows, because since this call started, the rules of what you can and cannot say on a college campus have changed.
You got to remember too, as a guy who worked almost exclusively for years in the college market, and this loops back to Jeffrey's original question, is we always end up sort of framing things in generalities, you know, to start with a starting point. But I'll tell you, like, I've worked at conferences, right? I've had a booth at NACA, and I've had college students walk up to me. There's 4,000 colleges in the United States. Like, I've had college students walk up to me and say, do you do R-rated shows? And I say, no, I don't. I only work clean. And they go, okay, thanks. And they walk away. Right. So definitely they're in the minority, but I don't want any of you to think like you can't. There are still crowds that will welcome you doing that kind of a show, that will hire you and welcome you. And it's just incumbent on you to know, you know, to know what your audience is and to be prepared for that.
And if I could just go back to the improv question real quick.
Yeah.
My approach is that what my show is if improv and crowd work were to both have Tinder profiles and they were both to swipe right and then hook up, my show would be The Offspring 9 months later. I think it is improv combined with crowd work. The only difference is the people you're doing the crowd work with, you're bringing up on stage, so they only got to take one step to be able to Will Smith your ass.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Paul, the flip side of Jeff's question is a friend of mine, he was doing some shows and he got booked to do a few clubs and he does some shows with us and it's not a prude, but not dirty. And the clubs were like, well, we need you to dirty it up a little more. We want you to, you know, to use, well, we to do things like tell her pussy's talking. And he goes, I just don't do that. You know, I don't feel well, it'll be funny, you know. And he goes, I'm sure it is. But he goes, I just don't do that. So here we're worried what we can't say. And he's like, you know, I don't feel comfortable doing some of this, and I won't. And so.
You know, Danny Candel's talked about that before, Terry, of like, there's not much that Danny doesn't feel comfortable doing, right? Like he'll do just about anything if you ask him to. If you say, this is the kind of crowd we have, like, it's okay. He's like, all right, fine. But he's talked about that before too, of like, but that's not necessarily what he just automatically gravitates to. You know, and then if there is something, right, like he told me a story once about how it was actually a corporate event. It was a corporate event, and like it was either the CEO or the VP. Right before he walked out on stage to start the show, the guy comes up to him and grabs him and says, "You see that guy?" He points out to you see that guy in the front row? And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "I want you to just fuck with that guy nonstop. Like, you just fuck with him and fuck with him and fuck." And that's one of those where he was like, "Yeah, that's not really what I do." Like, and the guy was like, "No, it'll be funny. Come on." But he said he could tell by the guy's tone that the guy wasn't really just about being funny. Like, he had something going on with that guy where he wanted that guy to get messed with, And that's, and Danny was like, "No, it's not really my thing," And so it is a weird kind of spectrum of what you can have to deal with. Yeah.
Well, can I put this question this way, guys? Is there any specific thing that you no longer do because of this change in the air?
I don't say ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the gendered language is as a starting point. I try not to say ladies and gentlemen anymore. I for so long, I'm 48 years old. For so long, I just said guys, you guys. And that'll piss off college crowds now too. So I try to folks. I switched to folks.
Yeah.
Hey folks, let's go. And I try to, and again, like the other interesting thing about that is, like, I honestly do see it both ways. I see it as like, if you feel like that's out of hand or silly, like, I'm open to that opinion, but I also think, but how does it really hurt me to just do what they want and make people feel more included? Like, I don't, like, you can go as deep in that rabbit hole as you want. But again, I think it comes back to what Jim and Colin reaffirmed, right? Is I'm here to serve. So if I'm here to serve and you say this is what you need, then I'm going to do my best to do that. I'll always remember the first time I went to a show and it was a school I had performed at every year for at least a decade. And then this one year, finally I went, and the advisor came up to me and she said, "Hey, we're working on something new and we'd appreciate it if you could help us out." And it was the first time someone ever asked me to not use pronouns in a show. Like, she actively was like, "We would like you to do your best to not assume that the pronoun of the person you're talking to." She said, "It's a big thing we're doing on campus." And I literally, it was early enough in the game. This was a school that was very progressive. So they were kind of ahead of everyone else. A couple of years later, it was happening more and more, but they were like at the front of it. And so I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" Like, I did not, I just didn't know. I just didn't, again, a lot of us hadn't gotten into those issues yet. Right. And so she was so great. She laid it out and she explained it. And I was just like, "Yeah, if that's what you want." I was like, "Just understand that's not my habit. So, like, I may mess it up, but if I mess it up, it's not because I'm trying to." She's like, No, I get it." She's like, "They were so great about it." But that was the beginning of where I was like, all right, stuff's changing. Like, culture's changing and systems are changing. And so that kind of brings us back. Let me purposely bring it back, like, to really, like, at the core of that is what's funny. Does that mean that fundamentally, like, it's not just behavior, right? Like, there we almost spun off to like manners and PC, and that's appropriate to talk about, of course, but how does it come back to this idea of, like, does it fundamentally change what is funny, or is what's funny still funny? It's just that some people don't want that funny, and so you just don't do that funny. You know what I mean? Am I getting there? Yeah. Colin? Jim?
No, you just hit it spot on. I do think that it is a big deal when the mob begins to control the language that I can use. Okay. And honestly, I'm going to push back on some of that. Unless somebody says, "Listen, here are my pronouns," then I'm going to treat that as individual with respect. One of the things that's important for comedic purposes, a lot of times, is that you have your volunteers sometimes going male, female, male, female. Okay. that can be important. Issues between men and women have been funny forever. They've been fair game forever. And that there is a small minority that, and we call them college freshmen, who are easily offended by the words ladies and gentlemen. You know, it's like, listen, if the college freshmen are hiring me and they don't want me to say that, I will take that out of my pre-recorded intro. But other than that, it's like, you know, we're gonna go with it, you know. So that's my take.
Jeff, you got your hand up. Do it.
Yeah, I got.
I'm sorry, is my still hand still?
Oh,
that's
sorry,
different.
I meant Jeff Bennick. I
Jeff,
forgot
go.
we have two Jeffs tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, I got the surprise last year, 10 minutes before the show, that I couldn't use any pronouns, and my whole show was based on the social interactions of boys, girls, to build up that tension. So they really threw me under the bus, and one of the parents was really harsh about it. What I could and couldn't do. That I was thinking about how am I gonna do this show on the fly, because I do a heavily produced show with soundtracks behind and everything is built in the way. It's my normal theater show that I take to colleges. So I had to totally change in the last minute. And how far can we go when they ask you in the last minute?
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. Does anyone? I'm trying to keep track of time. Does anyone have any last questions for Jim before we close the interview portion and switch to mastermind portion? Because it's time to do that. Anyone been holding a question for Jim? No, Jim. I want you.
How much?
Terry, go ahead.
How much street hypnosis are you doing now, Jim?
Not very much. I'm kind of phasing it out. I don't really. It served its purpose, but it's not a moneymaker. So
Yeah.
So it's good
No,
for views. I mean, I'll still go do it and stuff, you know, from time to time, but it's not really the right season for it right now. But no, that was really kind of a means to an end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jim, before we conclude the interview portion, I want you to talk about, you know, normally I tell the gang we're not selling stuff here, and I feel like this is a reasonable exception because we're not really selling, but we are promoting. I want you to talk about you're starting a online summit that's specifically for stage hypnotists. So in my mind, it's an opportunity for professional development. It's not like you're going to get rich on it.
Yeah.
We're such a small niche. And I know that that's more where your heart is that it's the professional development opportunity. Tell us about the online summit and what do we need to know about that?
Well, next year I'll probably be saying I don't do it anymore because there's no money in it. No, no, this really is like, somebody was asking me about it the other day and I'm like, there's no way I couldn't even get the money back that I've spent in time at this point. And it's not even launched yet. Yeah, it's, so one of the things that I noticed is I would have a lot of stage hypnotists don't get down to hypno thoughts because of the timing. They're doing fairs and stuff. And then we don't have them. A lot of them couldn't do my conference in the Northwest because it's during grad night season. So I was like, hey, what if we did something at a different time of year and we could get like a worldwide involvement? And that's why, you know, an online type of a presence. And believe me, I don't like online conferences either. I would much rather go in person. But this way we can get people from Europe and Asia and everywhere. So it's really an opportunity for us to all learn from each other. I think that it's really tough, you know, this is a great example of, it was so much easier to get better in stand-up comedy because you always got to watch somebody and they could give you notes afterwards. They could come up and go, hey, are you open to notes? And you go, yeah, give me some notes. Or here, I wrote a tag for you. I wrote a joke for you or something. We're so insulated that we don't learn from each other. And I know there's some people out there that are like, oh, I'm not going to share my stuff. But there's a lot of us that are willing to share because look, if I have a bad show, it's not just a reflection on me. They're not going to think that, you know, oh, it's just that hypnotist. Probably they're going to go home and go, I would never see another hypnosis show before because they suck, right? So it's bad for everybody. So the better we are in the industry, I think the better the industry will be. So yeah, it's really just an opportunity. It's March 11th and 12th. If anybody here wants to apply to present, love to have you do that. And then we will, have a great time. I think 12 hours each day.
12 hours each day.
Yes.
All right. That's busy. That's a lot. Okay, cool. Very cool. Excellent.
Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Jim. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Yeah.
We'll see you again at the Stage Hypnotist Mastermind. Thanks for watching.